Welcome to Thunder Nerds. I'm Brian Hinton.
I'm Janelle Pizarro.
And I'm Frederick Philip Von Weiss, and thank you for consuming the Thunder Nerds, a conversation with the people behind the technology
that love what they do.
And do tech
good.
Ha!
We're doing tech, guys. Sorry, that's starting.
Super fun.
You know, Shop Talk Radio actually said that we are the #1 fun tech podcast out there.
Nice. Oh my gosh, you guys love
No, it was
us?
CodePen Radio.
Oh, I'm sorry, CodePen Radio.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
you
CodePen
also
Radio.
guys
like
love
that's
us?
similar, right? It's the same people.
Yeah. That's why I said
I
Shop
guess
Talk.
it counts, yeah.
Yeah.
Which was so awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you love
Yeah,
us.
that's
We
awesome.
love you.
Yeah. And we are at VueConf US 2019.
You did it again. Got the year again. Good job.
Thanks.
Hey.
I've been practicing.
We're in Tampa, Florida at the...
Straz Performing Arts Center.
Yeah, it's beautiful here. Yeah.
Yeah. And we are with a very special guest. We are with Divya Sassy Darn.
Yes, that is me.
Yeah.
Yay!
Yeah. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah. So happy to have you here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've done podcasts, but this is the first time I've done like a video thing going
Ooh.
on. Like
Oh.
everyone like sits on the couch together. It's
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome.
interesting.
We're all
That's fun.
Oprah. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like strangely comfortable.
Oh, yay!
Well, good. We keep it fun.
We
Yeah.
did just spend the last 3 minutes complimenting her. So
Yeah. And we had a big group hug with our last guest right
We
before this. So yeah,
did.
we're all about the love.
We're
Yeah. So what exactly do you do for our audience?
That's a good question. So I'm
I thought so. Thanks.
She's like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
a good first question. So I'm a developer advocate at Netlify. And I'll explain like the two parts of that. So like
Yeah.
being a developer advocate is kind of like being a developer, but you like talk a lot more and you rack up travel miles and you have to like tolerate jet lag, I guess.
So
And
it's an extroverted developer.
Yes, yeah, in a sense, like forced extroversion.
Which coast are you on?
What was that?
Which coast are you on?
I live in Chicago,
Oh,
so I'm
Chicago,
pretty
yeah.
much like Midwest.
Yeah.
So yeah, it like very much central time zone. Yeah, but if I travel within the US, it's totally fine because like there isn't much time differences
Yeah.
between. But yeah, international is usually the one. But anyway, so that's what a developer advocate is. And then Netlify is a company that we are trying to encourage this new way of building your applications. So we encourage this. We have this acronym called Jamstack, which is
The Jam. Yeah.
the Jam, because we like Jam, and also it's an acronym.
I like jam.
Yeah, Jam's great.
Strawberry?
Yes.
Yeah. Get rid of those
Very-
servers.
Yeah, so no servers, it's like using serverless functions. So the idea is the Jam stands for JavaScript API and Markup. And so the idea is that you're trying to decouple your apps as much as possible. So in the past, a lot of people build their apps full stack. So you have your front end and your back end in the same code base, which is kind of clunky. And then you also have to like manage a server, and there's a lot of extra stuff that happens. So in terms of agility and maintainability, it's always kind of tough. And I've been on teams where that has been the case. And so Jamstack is this idea of where you split your front end and your back end. So your back end is kind of like a microservice. So like microservices are a thing, and your front end talks to your back end via API calls. So that's where the API part is. And the markup is obviously like your front end, right, in JavaScript. So
For that.
Yeah. Definitely makes things a lot more performant.
yeah, exactly. And it's also like really nice because you can go from like MVP to like actual finished product. Because a lot of the times people are like, when they build a prototype, it looks nothing like the finished app. And with the Jamstack, it's really easy for the two to look fairly similar because you're already building kind of with the end in mind, but without having to optimize for it.
Yeah.
Because there's so many applications where you have to think about a lot of the challenges that will come down the road before you even have like that large audience of people, and making sure like your server has an uptime and so on.
They're kind of building it together too.
Yeah,
Which is
exactly.
nice.
Yeah, so it's really nice. It's composable. It makes like, in a sense, there's a talk that Chris Coyer has, which is like the all-powerful front-end developer, which is actually very much like what Netlify is like championing, which is like just the way we build things. Because I think with the Jamstack and with like modern front-end developers are no longer what they used to be, which is like, oh, you just build like CSS. But now, so now like you're slowly doing like a lot more.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And there's a lot of responsibility and expectation, and you don't have to like write Docker or understand
Yes.
like Django.
Yes.
And you can easily use the skills that you have as a front-end person to build like very robust applications, which is cool.
I am so glad you talked about Netlify because we were just talking, like, we have heard Netlify, like, I feel like for me at least, once a week for the past 3 months.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Like
Yeah.
where, like it feels like it came from nowhere and it's just like, boom, Netlify in your face.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
so that's
awesome.
super, super cool that you're able to kind of tell us what Netlify is
Yeah,
and
of
like
course.
what you guys champion. So that's super cool.
Yeah. And also we have like these fun stickers.
Yeah, I have.
Oh!
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah,
They're
so-
wizardy.
Yeah, so we're at a lot of the VueConfs, and we've been at the first. So I guess there's only been 2 VueConf US's so far, last year's and this year's. And so we've been at, I guess you can say all of them.
100% of all of the view conference.
And 100% of all the VueConf is in the US. And every year we create like a sticker for it. So last year we created like a New Orleans sticker, which was like a dude playing like a saxophone. So it's become like a thing that we do now.
That's
What was
cool.
that?
Yeah.
I did not
Design.
bring any of those.
Oh.
We could definitely try to ship them.
Ooh. We'd be
That'd
down
be
with
fun.
that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I've used Netlify a little bit. I really like just the visual aspect of building. You're basically building an API, but
Mm-hmm.
very visual. I mean, you could kind of do before using there's like applications where you build a table, but you're building it as a table.
Sure.
Like Netlify, you're building it like, oh, I want an input, I want a text field, I want a media. It's very, very awesome software. What I'd like to know before we get into like what you're talking about is the behind the scenes of what it took to build the talk, like the time, I like to know like the time you spent and the things that you stressed about, and can you give us a little behind the scenes of that?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll start from like the inception of the talk, which is I have been like before I was at Netlify, I worked at a company where I dealt with a lot of forms and building forms.
Yeah.
And I do that at Netlify as well, because Netlify we have a feature like that does form support for you. So we have a backend. You can create a form and it saves the data to our database. It's like magic.
I love magic.
It's really nice. And so I've been like in this space of like thinking about forms a lot. And I carried that interest with me to Netlify. And so like input masking is one of the biggest things that is kind of a key UX pattern. It's kind of underrated, I think, within the landscape of forms. I think overall forms, people think about it as like a negative thing. It has a really bad rap. It's like when you talk about forms, people are like, ugh, it's horrible. Like filling them out and building them. And,
Yeah.
like all of it. And so, yeah, so this was kind of just like a thing that I was thinking about and I talked to multiple people about. And like Chris Fritz was like, hey, you should talk about this because it would be really interesting. And so that kind of was how I created the proposal. Because in the realm of things, it's like I've been thinking about this from different component pattern, like type ways of building things. So like Vue's reactivity system and then how you can make things as a library or plugin so it's reusable. So there's like so many pieces of it that if anything, it's no longer about the actual thing, like the UX pattern, it's more about like building components as a whole, which is kind of how this talk is morphed. Because like as I've been like hacking at this and trying to figure out the direction I want to take it, I realized that for me, it was really exciting to talk about the different ways of approaching a specific problem. So input masking is like one problem, and there's like, these are all the solutions. And then you can talk about like the pros and the cons and like why you would build it a specific way. And like looking at it from like, you're a developer, what would be the easiest way for you to implement this? So if you were to create a directive, for example, it's really nice because then you're not declaring like any markup. In a directive, you're just essentially creating like specific hooks and there's like functionality, and then you can just use like v dash, like whatever you call it. So v dash mask in an input element and it does like that logic for you.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So it's like super nice. There's another way you can do it with just renderless components where it's still like presentational, except you're not really rendering anything. You're just rendering like scope slots, like whatever's within it, right? But yeah, so there's like all these different ways of building the same thing, really. So just like talking about it from that level is really interesting because it can get really abstract, and having something really specific like an input mask gives it kind of grounds that conversation a little bit.
So how long did it take for you to compose your talk, and have you done practice sessions?
Yeah.
And, who did you make watch? And
yeah, so with a talk, I always wish I was more methodic about my approach to it, but I'm never that. I always assume like, okay, I'm gonna usually like a couple of months out, I start thinking about like the demos I want to build, the direction I want to take it, but it never really starts to become a talk until like 3 weeks
2 days before.
Yeah, or like 4 weeks before, where I'm like, okay, maybe it's the time when I start putting things in Keynote where it actually starts to feel like a talk. And so I try to force myself to do that sooner. I think there have been times where I do it like a week before and it's been a nightmare. For this, I really like pushed myself to do it like 3 weeks before, to be nice. Like put stuff on Keynote, like start thinking about the structure of a talk, play around with the order of like how you introduce ideas and talk about stuff. And so it's been like a work in progress for a while. In terms of the run through of the entire thing, I've done it like once and I'm probably going to do a lot more today because I've worked on the talk in parts, and that's usually how I work on talks, where like doing an entire talk consistently, some people like that. I find that like really like frustrating because it takes up a lot of time, and then over like as you practice you start to lose interest. And so I work in sections. So I'm like, this is one part of the talk that I'm workshopping. Yeah. And so instead of trying to run through the entire thing, because you lose steam. So I'm like, I'm just going to workshop this idea and then just like work on that part, polish it, and then like jump to another section, work on that part, and then just keep going back and forth.
So, okay, so that's cool. This is going to be the first time you're giving this talk.
Yeah, so this conference is the first time I'm giving this talk. Yeah. Because I've not given it anywhere else. I've talked about like form design patterns and stuff before, but this is like a little different from that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the talk is building fast and semantic input masks and VueJS.
Yeah.
We never did mention that again.
Yeah, that is the top title.
What exactly is that? What does that mean?
So fast and semantic being like, for me, semantic is something that it's just like semantic HTML. So when you write out something, does it make sense? Mm-hmm. So like with an input mask, like obviously you're using an input, like that is what semantic means. And also the other part is what makes the most sense, like from a developer experience perspective, because I think about this from assuming I'm building a library and I want people to use my thing, and it's an input mask library. Would I want someone to have like to use it via directive? So you do v-mask in an existing template, or would you want them to like include your component and then wrap your component in their code? Yeah. And so thinking about it from that perspective, kind of was what like that is like to me the semantic aspect of it. It kind of takes semantic and like extends it much further than the actual meaning of the word. And I guess fast is also like part of that. It's like developer experience. What is like the most ergonomic? What makes the most sense? Yeah.
So what got you like super interested in form architecture? I mean, I know that's usually relegated to like, people with a lot of patience. And a lot of
yeah, I think I just kind of fell into it. I've worked on it a lot in the past, and as I said, the job before Netlify, I worked at a startup, and we were essentially building like Excel.
I get that.
So you love Excel?
I do. I think Excel's great. Building this thing was kind of ridiculous and crazy. It was for real estate developers, because when they do the numbers, they use Excel. But there's no versioning or like no way of sharing documents that is good. So they just have like the old way of like how you would share Photoshop files with people is like _version1, _version _final1.
Really final. This is for sure the last one.
Yeah. So it's the same like with Excel's Excel spreadsheets and like real estate developers, that's exactly how they would share it. And so I was working on it with the team, not just me.
You by yourself.
Well, there were 2 of us front-end developers, so it is like full startup mode. We worked on a form. We had like a data science team that did a lot of the number crunching and a backend team and stuff. And I was doing the front end with a coworker of mine where it was fully in Vue. So we would make API calls, and like as a user types, we would update, and we had like various input masking. And so we also had charts. So as you're typing a number, it updates the chart and it shows you like changes.
Charts, tables, forms.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. So yeah, that's kind of, to me, I realized there was a lot to think about within this space. It's very specific, but it's also interesting because there's a lot to explore within that. Yeah. So I think it's my current, like, where I'm spending a lot of time in. And at Netlify, it's also something that we get a lot of questions about because forms is actually one of the bigger features that people come for. And so just trying to make sure that we create content around that is like key. Because ultimately, as a developer advocate, it's like, how can you get people to be excited about the products that we offer? Which like a lot of the stuff we offer is free. And so it's like, here, we're giving this to you for free. And like, here's some tools and like tutorials on how you can use this in your current apps and stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely like really cool that you're able to be so passionate about forums, especially because I would say most of the internet is asking users about what they like for their data.
Yeah,
right? Like it's literally like, give me your data,
so
that I could give you more data,
so
that you could give me more data, right?
Yeah.
So forums are a huge part of like data sharing.
Oh, completely. Sure. And I think there was a talk I gave at Connect Tech last year, which is the same organizers of VueConf. They organize Connect Tech in Atlanta. It's a great conference. It's very like more than Vue. It's a lot more frameworks. But at that conference, I essentially talked about forums and how everything is really a form if you think about it. So if you are on Instagram and you're like posting stuff, you have to fill in inputs.
Yeah,
like that's a form.
That is a form.
And like if you want to look up some directions on Google Maps, you're filling in an input. And like it makes an API call and gives you data. Like it's all a form. So like
question answer,
yeah, it's question answer. So
world is a form.
Yeah. I had this like really cheesy phrase that I used that I don't know if it worked. So like cash rules everything around me.
Cream.
Yes. So I was like forms rule everything around me, but like I tried to make it like an acronym and then didn't like I couldn't figure it out. I wanted to make it like freak. But I was like, I don't know what the K would stand for. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I mean, you can still use
figure it out.
Forms.
Frame, which like doesn't make sense.
Frame. Forms rule everything around me.
Yeah.
Form.
Input field.
Input field, son.
Yeah. Done. Oh my gosh. This is a perfect time.
Oh no. Okay.
Frederick, your beautiful
okay.
Your rap.
I don't think this is the appropriate.
No, this isn't.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Hey, you got a freestyle rap on you?
I don't.
I
I do not. I'm actually really bad at rapping. When I was younger, I really liked Eminem, and I tried really hard because it was like cool. I don't know if it was common, but like as kids, you're like, yeah,
I could do that.
Spaghetti, like
Slim Shady for sure.
And then you would just like do that, and then just fail.
I want to hear the spaghetti rap.
No, it's like Mom Spaghetti. But then I saw a YouTube video that like made sense because that whole YouTube video they re-edited it so he just says Mom Spaghetti throughout the whole.
I love
thing.
that.
It's like blah 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 Mom Spaghetti, Mom Spaghetti. Like yes, that's exactly how I don't remember lyrics, so
that's how I rap too.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Well,
one thing I do want one briefly mention is that one thing I really dislike in the industry, and I just want to see what you think about it, is how there's a negative. For some reason, people downplay the significance of what a developer advocate is and what they do. And what would you say to those people that seem to misunderstand all of the work that you all actually do?
Yeah.
So
I guess to like the stuff I've heard is that And a common criticism that I've heard is that a developer advocate is kind of like, you can't relate to the average developer because you're always building demos and like cool stuff and working at the edge of technology. But most developers don't get to do that. And they have to work on legacy apps, so they have real world concerns. And I think it's easy to just typecast developer advocates to be like, you don't know what it's like. And honestly, I know a lot of developer advocates who try really hard to stay relevant, which is like really hard because as a developer, and I've been a developer for many years, it's really easy for you to just settle. You're like, cool, I'm just gonna do this thing and like work on this product, and you know the product really well. As a developer advocate, you're like just constantly trying to be like, I need to learn this thing, I need to be up to date, because you're speaking at conferences, you're right in front of developers. People are asking you questions about things, and you have to just make sure you know what's happening. So your finger is on the pulse a lot more, and you're constantly learning and relearning. And so there's that aspect of it. The other aspect is also, I think people misunderstand that a developer advocate doesn't just travel. So at Netlify, we talk a lot with, and we work a lot with the sales team and the product team. And so we're hearing a lot of, and support actually. So support talks to us about what customers reach out to them about. And then we figure out where the gaps are in terms of the content or tutorials we offer. And then as developer advocates, we try to fill those gaps. Because the goal is to make sure that when people come to us, they've exhausted every single like resource we've offered. Yeah. And then that will like reduce hopefully the support load. Because like a lot of the times people reach out to support when that answer could easily be, you know, like that question could easily be answered. Yeah. But we obviously know that, and a customer might not. So we're like, how do we make sure that the products we offer at Netlify are relatable and people understand it and they can just like go with it? And I think that's the same for any developer advocate anywhere. The goal is to make sure that like, not only that you're advocating for your product, but you're making sure that the overall developer experience is good. Because you are like embedded, like you're in this weird role where you're a developer who would use the product, but you're also working for that product. So you're like kind of going back and forth to be like creating this empathy to think about what would a potential customer want, and then bringing that back to product and then pitching them to be like, okay, I think this is what a customer would want, and I think this is what that potentially could look like. And so you're talking to product, you're talking to support, and then the other part is you're also talking to the sales team. So when you go to conferences and travel a lot, you meet people who work at various places, and sometimes it's like one developer who works at a giant corporation who's like, I mean, every company always thinks about like, okay, I need, like everyone wants enterprise customers. So like developers usually are like, okay, they are part of a corporation who are potential enterprise customers. And then you want to like liaise with the sales team to be like, maybe we should talk to this person because it's a potential like relationship. Anything to develop. Because like, I mean, it might not be there might not be a transaction, but it's like a good relationship to have. Oh my God, because you want people to use your product. And so so talking to sales is really useful from that perspective, but also like I learn from the sales team what types of projects people use Netlify for, and then that gives us ideas on what to build and what to work on. It's good to have that insight from them.
You're a dual salesperson.
So you're kind of like, as a developer advocate, you're a developer, you're an advocate, you're also like trying to pitch the product, you're trying to like show the possibilities. And so it's like marketing and sales and like product, and it's just like everything.
You're everywhere.
And this is why, this is why I wanted to bring it up. I see it a lot in the communities online, how they really dismiss developer advocates, and we've talked to quite a few of them. And we know the amount of work. I mean, you're there for them as developer advocate. They're doing work for developers. They're trying to make your lives better. So be nice, as our previous guest.
Just be nice. Oh, great. Well, how can people get a hold of you? What's your Twitter handle? What's your website? We'll put a link in the show notes.
Sure. So my Twitter handle is shortdiv.
I love that.
That's amazing.
Thanks. And then my website is shortdiv.com. It's like a thing.
How'd you get that?
So when I was in high school, there were 2 Divyas and I was the shorter one. And so everyone called me Short Div.
I love that.
And it just kind of stuck. And this was
Do you still go by that? Like, do people still call you?
Yeah, I mean, people do. I think Div is usually a common one because there's not a lot of Divyas. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, that stuck. In high school, I was like just getting into tech, and then like the name kind of made sense.
Yeah.
You know, at the same time. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Divya, thank you so much for being on the show.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Stay tuned. We got a lot more coming up. Toodles.